so sorry.
When he slammed into the car carrying little Santiago,
who was left to die locked inside a plastic box.
Now, one of two men accused of killing him is testifying against the other to save his own life.
Courtrooms reveal shocking moments of raw emotions, violence, and unexpected twists that leave everyone speechless. From mass fights to attacking the police officer, everything can happen in court.
Well, Mr. Wilson, you have an opportunity, just like during any of the other phases of, well, let me just finish real quick. Any other phases during the case, if you want to address the court, I would permit you to do that. Obviously, everything's recorded, but you would have that opportunity if you wish. No one can prevent you from addressing the court if you wish to, and no one can make you address the court if you don't want to. So it is a decision that's solely left up to you if you want to address the court or not.
Not today. Later, when I come back, I will. Today, okay. No, I won't.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Let's dig into our first case. Wade Wilson was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, both of whom he strangled in Cape Coral, Florida, in 2019. The case became notorious for the disturbing nature of the killings. Wilson had a history of violence, and during this time, he targeted these two women. He strangled Christine Melton in her home and later killed Diane Ruiz, even running over her body after strangling her to make her look like spaghetti, as he shockingly described it.
The verdict form appears to be in order. I'll have the clerk publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit, in Fort Lee County, Florida, criminal action. State of Florida versus Wade Wilson. Case number 19 CF 0568. Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follow as to the defendant in this case. Count 1, first-degree murder, Christine Melton. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2, grand theft motor vehicle. The defendant is guilty of grand theft motor vehicle. Count 3, battery. The defendant is guilty of battery. Count 4, first-degree murder, Diane Ruiz. The defendant is guilty.
Prosecutor Andreas Gardner led the case, arguing that Wilson's actions were cruel and calculated. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including phone records and eyewitness testimony placing him at both crime scenes. Wilson had no natural defense. Instead, his behavior in court was erratic and unsettling.
Let the record reflect that State's President, Defense Counsel, and the defendant are all present. We're here for sentencing. Was there anything else that the court needed to address prior to sentencing? All right. So I have considered all of the testimony and evidence, arguments of counsel, applicable case law, and statutes. I have prepared a written sentencing order, which I'll file contemporaneously with the pronouncement of the sentence here today. I also have copies for the state and defense, which I'll hand out.
Judge Robert Branning presided over the case. Wilson showed little remorse during the trial, often making bizarre statements and acting out in court. At his sentencing hearing, he refused to make a final statement, instead saying he would speak when he is back, leaving a chilling tone in the courtroom.
The court recognizes that there is no mathematical formula for considering the aggravating and mitigating factors. It is not enough to weigh the number of aggravators against the number of mitigators. The court carefully considered the nature and quality of each aggravator and mitigator. Having reviewed all of the aggravating factors proven beyond a reasonable doubt and all of the mitigating circumstances reasonably established by the evidence, the court finds that the aggravating factors greatly outweigh mitigating circumstances. Given the facts of the case, nothing in defendant's background or mental state would suggest that a death sentence is inappropriate. This court's review of other reported capital cases has led the court to conclude that the death penalty is not disproportionate in this case. Under the totality of the circumstances and evidence, the court finds no basis to override the jury's verdict. The totality of the circumstances warrants that the defendant Wade Stephen Wilson be sentenced to death for each count of first-degree murder.
Wilson's defense attorney, Lee Hollander, argued for leniency, but the brutal details of the murders left the jury and judge with no doubt. The jury recommended the death penalty, and Judge Branning agreed, sentencing Wilson to death. With this final judgment, this case wraps up here.
So sorry. I wish it was me. I did not deserve it. I did.
Let's have a look at our second case. Jordan Fuss was sentenced to 14 years in prison for causing a 2014 crash that killed 6-year-old Hudson Grignon. Fuss was driving intoxicated when he ran a red light and crashed into another vehicle, resulting in the tragic death of young Hudson. The accident occurred in Washington State.
Convicted drunk driver Jordan Fuss apologizing to the family of 6-year-old Santiago Giraldo, who he killed in a car crash.
During the trial, the prosecutor, Jason Richards, argued that Fuss had made a reckless choice by driving under the influence. Evidence showed Fuss had been drinking heavily before getting behind the wheel. Despite his intoxicated state, he chose to drive, leading to the devastating crash that took an innocent life.
On October 3, 2014, red light cameras captured then 19-year-old Fuss in his Infiniti sports car flying down Sterling Road with speeds reaching more than 100 miles per hour when he slammed into the car carrying little Santiago.
Fuss's defense attorney, Douglas Heyman, tried to argue for a lighter sentence, saying Fuss had shown remorse and didn't intend for anyone to get hurt. However, the seriousness of the crime and the loss of a child weighed heavily on the court.
But the impact so violent, it split their car in half.
Judge Carol Murphy presided over the case and listened to emotional testimonies from Hudson's family. In the courtroom, Hudson's parents tearfully described the pain of losing their son and the lasting impact it had on their lives. The atmosphere in the courtroom was filled with grief and anger as they called for justice.
When Santiago's father took the stand, he looked Fuss square in the eye.
May God forgive you, because I can't.
A translator telling Fuss his apology wasn't accepted.
He didn't just take my son's life, he took mine too.
Then came the verdict.
The court imposes the lowest permissible prison sentence allowable by Florida's Criminal Punishment Code, 14.625 years.
Guilty of DUI manslaughter, DUI unlawful blood alcohol level with serious bodily injury. Fuss had one last tearful message to loved ones while being fingerprinted.
I love you guys so much. I love you.
When sentencing Fuss, Judge Murphy acknowledged his guilt, but emphasized that his actions had consequences. She handed down a 14-year prison sentence, making it clear that his decision to drink and drive led to a tragic, avoidable loss. Fuss expressed his regret during the hearing, apologizing to the family, but the damage was already done. This case wraps up here.
What happened was an accident.
Let's have a look at our third case. John Allen and his wife, Samantha Allen, were sentenced to death for the horrific death of 10-year-old Aim Deal in 2011. Aim died after being locked in a small plastic storage box as punishment by the couple in Phoenix, Arizona. This case shocked the nation due to the cruelty involved.
And a jury has found John Allen guilty of first-degree murder in the death of 10-year-old Amy Deal Allen. Allen was also found guilty of 3 counts of child abuse and conspiracy to commit child abuse. Evidence showed Allen and his wife Samantha, who was sentenced to death in a separate case, locked the little girl in a plastic box in triple-digit heat back in 2011. John Allen could also face the death penalty.
The Allen family had regularly abused Aim Deal. The final incident occurred when John and Samantha forced her into the box for taking a popsicle without permission. They left her trapped in the box overnight in the summer heat, leading to her death from suffocation and heat exposure. Aim had been subjected to various forms of abuse by her family, but this punishment turned fatal.
Jury deliberations have begun in the trial of John Allen. Allen is facing a murder charge in the death of Amy Deal. He has pleaded not guilty. John's wife, Samantha, was convicted and sentenced to death.
Prosecutor Jeanette Gallagher argued that Aim's death was the result of extreme neglect and cruelty. She presented evidence of the physical and emotional abuse Aim endured for years. Gallagher described how the couple showed no remorse for their actions, making the case for the death penalty. John Allen's defense attorney, Gary Barron, tried to argue that while John was involved, his wife Samantha was the main instigator. However, the jury found John equally responsible for Ames' death. His involvement in locking her in the box and leaving her to die sealed his fate.
Having considered all of the facts and circumstances, unanimously find that the defendant should be sentenced to death.
Samantha Allen quietly cried on her attorney's shoulder after learning her fate would be death for the murder of her 10-year-old cousin, Amy Deal, who was left to die locked inside a plastic box and left out in the Arizona heat.
She didn't care what happened to this child, and it was all about what was going to happen to her.
Judge Teresa Sanders presided over the case. During sentencing, the courtroom was filled with tension and emotion. Family members of Amy Deal gave tearful testimonies about the pain of losing the young girl in such a horrific way. John Allen showed little emotion during the hearing. In 2017, Judge Sanders sentenced John Allen to death, following the jury's recommendation. Here, we conclude this case. Family members of Amy Deal gave tearful testimonies about the pain of losing the young girl in such a horrific way. John Allen showed little emotion during the hearing. In 2017, Judge Sanders sentenced John Allen to death, following the jury's recommendation. Here, we conclude this case.
From the time that I was 8 years old until I was 12 years old, I was sexually assaulted and raped by Dennis Pegg. It started out with him wanting to touch my scar that I had from open heart surgery at the age of 6. It progressed to wrestling matches, and eventually led to him raping me.
Here comes the next case. Clark Frederick's case happened in a New Jersey courtroom, where he stood before Judge Thomas J. Critchley. His story was different from most. Fredericks wasn't just another man accused of murder. He was a man seeking justice for the unspeakable horrors he claimed to have suffered as a child.
Dennis Pegg told me that he had sexual relations with a close family relative and also my childhood friend Jeff Hall. He described those relations in detail, and I believed him. He told me that he got drunk and naked with one of my close relatives and with Jeff, and he said he had taken pictures of them naked. He showed me Polaroid photographs that he said he had taken of other young boys and men unclothed. I saw Dennis Pegg with a boy who was about 13 or 14 years old at the Quick Check in Newton. I immediately suspected that he was molesting the boy.
Fredericks had been sexually abused by a former Boy Scout leader, Dennis Pegg, for years. Pegg was someone Fredericks had once looked up to and trusted, but the abuse left him deeply scarred. The pain and trauma followed him throughout his life, displaying anger and rage that simmered beneath the surface for decades. It all came to a boiling point on June 12, 2012.
Was Clark Fredericks right or wrong?
On that day, Fredericks couldn't take it any longer. Fueled by memories of his abuse, he and his friend Robert Reynolds went to Pegg's home. Armed with a knife, Fredericks confronted the man who had stolen his childhood. What started as a confrontation quickly escalated into violence. Fredericks repeatedly stabbed Pegg, ending the life of the man he believed had ruined his. After his arrest, Fredericks did not deny his actions. He was open about why he had done it. In a powerful courtroom statement, he said, "I did what I felt I had to do to stop the nightmare." His voice wavered as he explained the years of torment and how no one had listened to his cries for help. He described his act as one of desperation, not revenge.
That was until the trial started for serial child molester and former Penn State coach Jerry Sandusky.
My reaction to seeing Sandusky get out of that car with his lawyer was that Dennis Pegg would never be held accountable. My shell cracked.
Judge Critchley had a tough decision to make. On one hand, Fredericks had committed murder, and on the other, a lifetime of pain had led to that moment.
But his guilty plea on charges of passion, provocation, manslaughter avoids a murder charge. As he left the courtroom, this eruption of applause.
for coming out and standing up for himself.
No one related to Peg made any public statements. The prosecutors who agreed to the plea deal hope this brings closure.
And we feel it is a fair and appropriate result, given all the circumstances.
The judge said the sentence, anywhere from 5 to 10 years in prison, will be announced in September.
In the end, the court accepted a plea deal. Fredericks pleaded guilty to manslaughter, a lesser charge than murder, acknowledging that his actions, while driven by trauma, were still wrong. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. It's a wrap-up.
Felt by Mark and Sandy Cates, and by Jake and Back, Justin's brother. I have brothers and sisters myself. I can only imagine what it would be like to lose one of them. I'm sorry that this happened. And I know that doesn't bring Justin back, but I'm sorry. I wish I could go back in time and stop this before it even happened, but I can't. I hate for any family to go through such pain and suffering as this. To lose your son, I can't imagine. To lose your brother.
We are now at case number 5. Austin Myers was convicted of the murder of 18-year-old Justin Back during a burglary in January 2014. The crime took place in Waynesville, Ohio, at Justin's home, where Myers and his friend, Timothy Mosley, planned to steal a safe. Things quickly escalated, and the burglary turned into a brutal murder.
Now, one of 2 men accused of killing him is testifying against the other to save his own life.
Myers and Mosley went to Justin Back's house to rob him. While there, Mosley attacked Justin and strangled him, while Myers helped restrain him. The two then disposed of Justin's body in a remote area several counties away. After killing him, they took Justin's body to Preble County, where they tried to hide it by dumping it in the woods and attempting to burn it.
No mess.
What's the significance of that? What did that mean?
The idea of strangling them, that way it would create no mess, pretty much be an easier job to handle.
Fornshell also produced the wire that he says the two used to strangle Justin Back.
Obviously, Justin was trying to put up a fight, and he wasn't overpowering us.
Prosecutor David Fornshell presented a strong case against Myers. He argued that both Myers and Mosley were equally responsible for Justin's murder, despite Mosley being the one to carry out the killing physically. Fornshell showed evidence of their deliberate plan, including text messages and evidence from the crime scene.
That it doesn't haunt me of what I did, and there's absolutely no excuse, and I just want you guys to know that I really am sorry.
With Tim speaking today, it took another weight off. You know, it's different when they're sorry. It doesn't bring Justin back, but it helps with healing. It doesn't bring closure, but it brings some healing.
In October 2014, Judge Oda sentenced Austin Myers to death for his role in the murder of Justin Back. With that, this case finally concludes.
Put your hands behind your back.
It's unclear what McDonald is trying to say to the judge as he pulls his arms away. What is clear